All right. Hi, everyone. If you're joining us, if you're just joining us, feel free to put your name and organization in the chat where you're tuning in from California. It's always fun to see everyone who's coming from all over the state on these webinars with us. So my name is Christina Harrington. Some of you probably have talked to me a couple times, have sent me emails. So nice to meet you again. And I'm here today hosting our last application office hours for the Farm to Community Food Hubs grant. Applications are due this coming Monday by 5 p.m. We'll talk about shortly how you submit your application with all the materials. If you have any questions, you can always email our inbox, which is on the screen right now, cafoodhubs@cdfa.ca.gov. That is the best way to reach me at this point. I'm the person on the other end because there's a lot of emails coming through and I'm living in that email inbox. So today, if you haven't joined our office hours before, how this is going to work is I'll go over a couple slides. I'm probably going to do less than I've done in previous sessions because I imagine now we really just want to get some answers for our questions. But I'll go over a couple slides and then really most of today is to respond to your questions as much as I can, whether you want to put that in the chat or once I finish presenting, you can use the raise your hand feature on Zoom and I can ask you to unmute and we can discuss it verbally. Okay, if you didn't hear the announcement from Zoom, this session's being recorded. It will be on our website in a couple days. The recordings from our other application office hours are also on the website. So, unless I hear any strong feelings in the chat, I was thinking actually today I won't go over eligibility as much. I might just focus real quick on the grant website, just making sure everyone knows where those application materials are, making sure you're using the correct ones, how to apply, of course, and then really just focus on questions. So if you feel differently or strongly, put it in the chat if you want me to review all the things that we have in the past or what you see on the slide right now. But we can always address questions too as they come up. So again, applications are due this coming Monday, 5 p.m. So that's Monday, April 14th. How you apply is once you've completed all the required application materials for your funding track, you would email those as attachments to our email inbox, which is cafoodhubs@cdfa.ca.gov. We'll go over the website together in a moment. All the application materials are on our website, as well as the request for application, which has all the rules, guidelines, and regulations for the program. And then the hot tip I always give people is to use our application submission checklist, which is really a quick guide to help applicants track what material they need to submit for each of the funding tracks. Okay. So email is the best way to reach me right now. Again, there's our email inbox. We have FAQs, frequently asked questions, on our website. I have been regularly updating those every couple weeks or so, and those questions, a lot of them are sourced directly from other applicants. So sometimes that's a really great resource to look for something that might have already been responded to. This is our last application office hours, and many of you know I've been doing one-on-one meetings with folks, but I am completely full. I don't have any more availability because tomorrow's the last day I'm meeting with folks. So our other resources on the website are our recordings from past webinars. The request for application is a long document, but it has all the rules and regulations and guidelines about the grant. In there is also a section on page 3 called Tips for Applicants, and that might be particularly useful for folks who might have never applied for a CDFA grant or a grant at all, or maybe it's their second time and maybe those tips are helpful. And then again, that application submission checklist I mentioned will be a quick guide for you to understand, okay, if I'm applying to track 1, here's what I need to apply or submit. If I'm applying to track 2, here are the materials I need to submit. So I'm gonna share the grant website just to make sure we all know where these materials are. And then we'll get into questions. So this is making sure you can see it. Yeah, this is our grant website, the homepage, well, the only page. And you scroll down, how do I apply is right here. Applications due 5 p.m. Here's this application submission checklist I mentioned, which I think I have right here. And looks like this. Just giving you a quick overview. If you're applying to Track 1 Planning, here are all the materials you need to submit, which you find on the website. I'll show you in a moment. If you're applying to Track 2, here are all the materials you need to submit. You find all these materials on the website right here. So if you're applying to Track 1, all the application materials are going to be under this green drop-down menu here. So the application questions document is there. This is the review criteria. This is not something you need to submit, but it details how reviewers are going to score each part of your application. Here's the work plan template, the project budget template, and a letter of support template. Letters of support are required for track 1 or requested. This template, you don't have to use this template. You can use your own if you like. So that's why it says optional. The using this template is optional, but we are requesting letters of support for track 1 applicants. If you're applying to track 2, all your information is here. Here's your drop-down menu with all the materials. The track 2 application questions, again, detailed review criteria, the track 2 work plan, the project budget template, the track 2 food producer network list, the track 2 food producer verification form, which is in English or in Spanish, depending on what your food producers might need. And then the track 2 letter of support form. You are supposed to use this form. It's a Word document for your letters of support for track 2. And then our FAQs are down here, and our recordings are here from our first kickoff webinar back in February, and recordings from our other office hours are here. And today's will be here in a couple days, excuse me. All right, so I'm going to stop there because I'm sure there's loads of questions. We want to just get to those instead. So again, if you want to raise your hand using Zoom, you can do that. And I'm going to try to bounce back and forth between chat and the raised hands. And we'll just get to it. So, all right, looking in the chat. Okay, got some folks from Glenn County. Hey, all right. Drea, formatting questions. For application, template, and letters of support, the answers are currently formatted in bold blue text. Do you want that formatting kept in the submission document? Work plan answers are formatted in red. Should we keep? Application questions for role, there are prompts, responsibilities, name, expertise, etc. Keep those prompts or just answer the prompts. What text is in black, or that text is in black? Great question. Thanks for asking it. I know a few folks have asked about it. So you don't have to keep that italics, that formatting, that color. It's kind of up to you. I put it in blue so it was more apparent for you, the viewer, looking at it. If you want to keep it in a different color, that is always appreciated for reviewers because it'll be easier to distinguish between what the question is and what you wrote. Or if you want to highlight it, whatever, it's kind of up to you. They're all Word docs or Excel spreadsheets. But yeah, in terms of the prompts in the roles there, yeah, don't remove the prompts, don't remove the application questions, anything that it came with, don't delete that because then reviewers are gonna not be very clear about what exactly you're responding to. So like for track 2, in the application questions, there's a lot of headers and orange text. Don't delete those. Don't delete any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we don't have a grant portal right now to be working with, so that hence the Word docs. So thanks for your patience, everyone. Um, all right, Mary Jane. Hey, Mary Jane. Greetings. Oh, sorry, you're just introducing yourself. I'm glad you're here. Welcome. Um, hello from LA. What up? I'm in LA. Evelyn. Hey, Evelyn. All right, Mary Jane, what is the deadline, date, and time to ask questions and request assistance? Yeah, great question. So right now, application office hours is one way to ask your questions. The best way to request responses for your questions is via email. I know before folks were calling my phone, which worked for a time, but now really email is the best way to reach me because I'm kind of living in that email inbox right now. And so I am going to be monitoring the email inbox today, tomorrow, and Monday till at least 5 p.m. all those days. And again, the application is due 5 p.m. on Monday. But for one-on-one meetings, I no longer have any availability for those. Great question. Rebecca, we have an extra community support letter of support, sorry, an extra letter of support for the community supporter category provided to us in CDFA's form. Would it be better to submit that as a letter on letterhead so as not to confuse it with the official letters of support that are in the CDFA form? Great question. If it's already in that format, that's fine. You don't need to kind of redo it or ask them to redo it. Submitting additional letters of support beyond what is requested. So for example, track 2, we're asking folks to submit 6 letters of support from 3 different categories. If you submit 7 letters of support, that will not gain you more points. Same for track 1. We're asking you to submit 5 letters of support from 2 different categories. If you were to submit 6, 8, 10, it won't earn you more points. But if you want to submit something, you're allowed to do that. It's email. You can kind of send me anything. All right, I will go to Eve for a raised hand, and then I'll go back to the chat. Hey, Eve. Okay.
Hey, nice to see you.
Yeah, same.
Thank you. Okay, can I ask 2 questions,
Yeah.
please? Okay. Well, first question is for the producer list scoring. Is the scoring rubric for that you get 2 points for each producer up to 10? This is for the track 2.
So for the network list, which is the spreadsheet,
Mm-hmm.
that is scored using a variety of things,
Okay.
or a variety of categories, and I'm just going to pull it up so we can all look at it together, the scoring criteria. So if anyone was on the call when I was looking at the website earlier, I pointed out the detailed scoring criteria for track 1 and track 2. So that's what I'm going to pull up right now. Okay. This is all public. This is what reviewers are going to be using when scoring applications. Okay. So this is the track 2 one. So the network list will be can earn up to 30 points. If you would earn 2 points if the list includes 10 or more food producer, businesses or organizations on the list. 0 points if it has 9 or less. You would earn 2 points if 40% or more of those food producers are considered, quote, local, which we've defined in the request for application as the food producer is operating in the same county as the food hub or in a county that shares a border with the food hub's county. And then 0 points if 39% or less of the producers are considered local. So you might have noticed in the food producer network list, and I can show that if folks want to look at it today together, there's you put in your applicant legal entity name, and then you put what county your operation is in. That is how we're going to judge whether the food producers are, quote, local. Are they in the same county as the one you listed, or are they in the adjacent counties, meaning they share a border with that county? Moving on, then in the food producer network list, there's multiple columns where you select yes or no. And those columns should be in orange. So you're saying yes or no if that particular food producer is socially disadvantaged, limited resource, operating on 500 acres or less, a beginning food producer, a veteran, disabled, or cooperatively owned. Those categories will be scored using this criteria. So if 75% or more of them meet that criteria, you would earn 3 points, and then it goes down step by step based on the percentage. Then the last category, the last column in that network list is, does this food producer use sustainable, regenerative, or climate smart practices, yes or no? Then that column will be scored based on a 5-point system. If 75% or more of those producers are using sustainable practices, it'd be 5 points, and it steps down from there based on the percentage. So if anyone's been working in that network list, you will actually see, assuming the equations didn't get broken, sometimes they break when you move it from one platform to another, but it should be automatically actually calculating percentages for you, so you can kind of get a sense of what reviewers will be looking at. And I can actually pull this up. Okay. So this is what the network list looks like, which if you're applying to track 2, hopefully this looks familiar to you. These were the fake examples I put in there in italics. So when you scroll down, you see these percentages that are calculating. That's the percentage for each category. So in this case, these are all fakes that I put in, right? But in this case, 75% of my producers are operating on 500 acres or less, so I would earn 3 points for this category. 25% are beginners, so I would receive less than 3 points, and so on and so forth. Because I only have 4 producers listed here, I would not earn the 2 additional points because I have less than 10. So things like that. Yeah, did that answer, Eve? And then I know you have a second question.
Was perfect. Thank you so much. Super helpful. My second question was about in the budget template, it auto calculates to the grant request amount, right? So that sort of bottom is the total amount requested. It also says in the instructions to include in the budget any costs that, like all the costs that will be needed to successfully do the project and to note where those are coming from additional sources. What's the best way to indicate that within the budget template since it does auto calculate to a single amount?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, there's multiple ways you could do it. It's whatever makes, I guess, is easier for you. I was gonna say makes most sense to you, but it should make sense to reviewers too,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Um, so you could, if you want to do it in the budget, you could list something and then say in kind
Mm,
and or I don't know, already own or something like
yeah,
that under the cost amount. So it's essentially a 0 and then it won't affect your total calculation at the end. You could do
yeah.
that because I'm pretty sure you can type in text and not only numbers in those cells. Um,
I think there's also a column to the right that like there's some has justification, and so there might be a way to have that
yeah,
also
that
have
too.
those notes.
You could
Okay.
write those in there in your narrative if you're referencing anything that you might already have or partnerships or something. If someone's providing something pro bono, like you could mention that in the narrative or in your project team. Sometimes there's partners, consultants, or even employees who might be paid by some other means, and
Yeah,
you could note that in parentheses, covered by other funding sources or offering this pro bono or whatever your situation might be.
got
You
it.
could add those details if you think that'll help better
Got,
explain what you're
and
proposing.
but the intention is to have the reviewers be able to see a full scope of the cost of the project and then
Oh, I
also
see. Um, so yeah, so the budget is what you want what you're requesting CDFA to cover.
Right.
Depending on your model, that might not be enough. So you could potentially explain some of those things in your financial sustainability section.
Okay, perfect.
If you know if there's additional costs that might be covered by revenue or other funding sources, if you have those available, that could also be a place where you could discuss that so
Okay,
that
perfect.
reviewers know, how to make this a feasible project.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay. And
that's a
then,
great question.
okay, so then probably most likely, just for simplicity's sake, just make sure that that work plan and budget align for what we're specifically asking CDFA to pay for within the broader context of the project.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, so your work plan and budget should be they should correlate. They should be
Yeah.
consistent between each other. So yeah, in some cases, maybe you are providing something, a service, or you're doing some kind of activity that's funded by something else, but
Hmm.
is like very integral to pulling off your proposed project to CDFA. If you want to make that clear, you could include that in your work plan, but again, making it clear, parentheses, covered by other funding sources or something. I like to tell people, your organizations, they're doing so many different things, and what you're showing us in this proposal is like a sliver of it, right?
Right. Yep.
So
Yeah.
I understand sometimes there's like maybe critical pieces that you want reviewers to know that this is happening, even though we're not asking you to pay for it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, financial sustainability makes sense. I think being able to explain that in sort of the overall project scope and narrative also makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, great questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eve. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the chat and then I'm gonna go to Jan, who will be next. There we go. Okay. Okay. Drea, clarification on producer network list and verification forms. We have we have all of our producers that could sell to the Food Hub on our producer list, and then we have 10 to 12 signed verification forms. Can we only list the producers on the network list that we have forms for, or can we list all our producers and then provide the minimum 10 verification forms? The last part. So your network list include all the producers that you anticipate the Food Hub will be sourcing from. We know that that is an estimation. It's a 5-year term. Things change seasonally, annually, things happen all the time. But doing your best estimation based on the relationships and, what you think you'll be doing. And then so that might be 20, that might be 50, that might be 10, doesn't matter. You only then need to submit 10 of those forms, verification forms. Anyone that has signed the verification form should be on your network list, but not everyone on your network list needs to sign a verification form. Yeah, great question. Danny, this is a quick question, and then I'll go to you, Jan. Is a zip file okay when submitting the materials? Absolutely. Feel free. Zip files are cool. I would stray away from Google links, stray away from the OneDrive links, things like that often need passwords to access them. And even when you're totally sure you enabled the access, like inevitably there's somehow we mixed it up. I always do that. And CDFA can't actually access Google most of the time when there's a firewall. So as much as you can download files and attach them, either directly or as a zip would be great. Okay. Jan, gonna go to you and you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. So we're on track 2, and my question is about the roles that we are explaining. And because we are in the beginning phases of this, the beginning stage, we have people who are fulfilling these roles, and they are not going to be the people who are actually doing them once the hub is established. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to sort of identify that. I wrote in there, note, this position is currently filled for the startup phase of the project, but will transition to paid staff at the appropriate time. Is that good enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me close my door real quick because my dog popped his head in. Okay, great question. So yeah, I would say if what it sounds to me like, and let me know if I'm wrong, that you plan to hire someone in the future to fulfill a role, right? Okay. Yeah, so you could add that in there, position X to be hired. That's fine, especially for folks who are going to be new or hiring new people, but they don't know exactly who yet. So you could put position X to be hired and, explain their role in the project and what experience you would be looking for when hiring that person. And yeah, just as you said, if someone's going to transition out for someone to transition in, that's totally fine. The way you described it sounds pretty clear to me.
So for instance, in the business development and administration, we currently have somebody who's working on that. And she's part of our steering committee, and she's working on it. It's an in-kind from the organization that she works with. So I'm saying all of the things that she's doing right now to basically to develop and get to the implementation stage, that role. And so I would include her, but then I would also say for the future role is to be hired.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes someone's asked, can two people fulfill a role? Yes. Yeah. Sometimes you're splitting time, or in your situation, they're gonna kind of like take over the helm for that role at some point.
So so underneath each one of these, then I'm basically adding another role. The first one being current development, and the second one being future implementation.
Yes.
And so when I'm doing it on the current ones, when it asks for what is the work title, I'm assuming that what you're asking there is what's the work title within the food hub, but I'm providing the work title that they actually have professionally right now. Is that okay?
Right.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. Yeah, because that would be the same for consultants, which I know is not the case for this person, but the same thing would be true for consultants. They
Okay.
might be part of a project team, they might be helping with some particular activity, but they're employed by their own contracting firm or, business or nonprofit, whatever they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's a great question. I know a lot of people have that question. All right, Maya, you're gonna be up after I look in chat. Janelle, can we paste in maps and graphics into the text areas to help explain our text answers? Great question. Yeah, I mean, it's Word, you can play with it, I guess. And sometimes, yeah, if you're a visual learner, maybe that would help. Um, okay, one more quick question. Formatting question. Application answers in Word, work plan in Word, budget in Excel, verifications in LOS in Word or PDF. Oh, I see. Maybe like what kind of file type to submit it in. Yeah, so actually I'll show you. So if you're just trying to memorize all this stuff, I'll show you the submission application checklist that I showed earlier. This is on our website. It will tell you what file type to submit it as. Submit it as a Word document or Excel or a PDF or Word, doesn't matter for letters of support. But for application questions and the work plan and the budget, please don't submit it as PDF because we need to go in there and work with it potentially. Just makes it easier if possible. And then same for track 2. It tells you here in this column what type to submit it as. Somebody asked me today, do we have to submit it as an Excel and a Word as in Microsoft? If we don't have Microsoft, no. If you don't have Microsoft, just submit it in whatever app you have available. if you're working in Google, often you can download those files. For Google, I think it becomes like a docx or something like that. So whatever file type you're able to download is fine. It doesn't need to be Microsoft. In most cases, we can access most types of files. Great questions. Okay, Jan, did you have another one, or is that just a leftover hand? Might be a leftover hand. I think Maya was next. Maya's nodding her head, yes. Okay. You should be able to unmute.
Hi there. Okay, so really grateful for this grant opportunity. Thank you. I'm going to try to say this really fast because we don't have a lot of time, a lot of questions. We are applying through the grant through the nonprofit that I work with, and they are in Kern County, but I live in Inyo County, and we would really, really, really thrive in our food desert to be able to support the very few local farmers we have here. And my question is, can we apply under one application, or do we have to have two? Because we're just getting going here in Inyo County, and I don't want to miss this opportunity. And I'm hoping the answer is we can apply under that one and just get going, because we really need this in Inyo County.
Thanks for asking that, Maya. So that I'm clear, you're wondering if you could be included on your, here, let me unmute you again. You're wondering if your organization could be included as part of the nonprofits application? I guess what would your role be in that?
So the nonprofit is in Kern County, Inyo, and Mono County. So the main office would be applying for the grant in Kern County, but we're wondering if do we have to just apply for one county, or do we have to have
Oh.
an application in Inyo Mono? Can we just do an umbrella?
Oh, I see. Oh, no.
We could do an umbrella, because then we can service 3 counties instead of just one.
Got it. No, it's fine if the
Great.
office is based in one county, been working in another, there's no rules against that. Yeah, as long as your entity is an eligible entity, then that's, yeah.
Okay, so grateful. That's beautiful. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya. Okay, great. Let me look in chat, and then Andrea, you'll be next. Tessa, what can funding be used for in school agriculture programs for Track 1? Well, I guess I'm curious on what you mean by school agriculture programs, but I will try to answer based on that. So for Track 1 planning, it is focused on funding planning activities for a community food hub. So um if your intention is and some concrete examples is that we have in the request for application is if you want to put together a business plan or work on a feasibility study, marketing strategies, if you want to fund any engineering designs for a food hub facility, things like that would be allowed in a Track 1 planning grant, but things need to serve and connect back to the purpose of the program, which is to fund and invest in community food hub projects to help increase purchasing of local, sustainable, and equitably produced food by institutions. So if you look at the definition of community food hub, that will be a good start to make sure that the intention of your project is aligned with the program's purpose. And I will just show it on the screen momentarily. So this is the request for application. That might seem daunting because it's 32 pages, but it really does have all the rules, regulations, and guidelines. So, and definitions. So this is the definition of community food hub. So the planning grant is not intended to fund the operations of a food hub, but really focus on the planning that might be needed to either plan, do some research and investigation into how to start a new food hub, if that's what your organization is trying to do, or if you're an existing food hub, planning that might be needed to expand your capacity, maybe marketing strategies, maybe a business plan if you're expanding into a new kind of arm of your business, if you will, for the food hub. So hopefully that helps. Or if you want to add more specific things in the chat or raise your hand, we can talk about that too. Okay. Andrea Kelly, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, I was trying to unmute myself and I'm like, why won't it let me? But okay. Hi. So I have a few questions and I'll try to be brief as possible. So I'm kind of on the fence of doing track 1 or track 2. We are a food bank, and we're building agroecology centered right in the back of our food bank. And we'll be doing purchasing from local smaller farmers to give out to people, right? So my thing with the community food hub will also be doing like education for small farmers, like how to get your business license, insurance, and all this other kind of stuff to kind of improve our local food system. But there are some stuff that doesn't kind of correlate with like a nonprofit kind of business model, because we're not going to be charging people for stuff, but there is like, we have to get 2 letters of support from buyers, but no one's buying anything from us. So I'm not sure, like, I don't want to submit this like application with all this information and everything, and it's just like DQ'd for like a technicality, because like we have the letters of support from our community members who are going to be receiving this food, and like they're very excited to be able to receive more local produce. But like, how do we word that, or is that something that we just need to reframe from and go to track 1? Because most of the funds will be going to support the building, the construction of that food hub center, the agroecology center. So, or I don't know. I'm just trying to get some guidance on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you're here. Yeah, so 2 things come to mind about that. One is based on what you described, where you'd be purchasing the food from producers, but
Mm-hmm.
then you'd be donating it to consumers, folks going to the food bank, it sounds like. So that in itself isn't aligned with the definition of community food hub, but also, which I'm going to share on the screen again, but also it's a CDFA grant regulation that grant recipients cannot incur costs related to donations and contributions, and that includes donating food. So folks wouldn't be able to donate food to anyone, whether it's a institutional buyer or a consumer. But then again, the definition of the food hub is, serving as a supply chain intermediary for California food producers, providing services to strengthen their ability to reach sales markets with wholesale, retail, or institutional buyers, and identifies the source of 100% of the food products that it sells. So that also is what came to my mind, is that the model you're describing doesn't sound aligned with the definition either.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to think. That's what I was like, is it track 1 or track 2? Because we're definitely doing the supporting of the local farmer, of like the education and stuff like that, and the classes for economic development, along with all that stuff for them to get to market, and then supplying a place where they're like being able to sell their goods. So I'm just all like, yeah, I was like unsure if that would be something that we do for track 1 or track 2, where we're just doing the economic development type of piece in track 1. So,
If your organization was wanted to, investigate or study in a planning grant of how to be a food hub as the way we've defined it, where you're sourcing from local growers, but then you're trying to sell it, creating sales markets for them with wholesale, retail, or institutional buyers, then maybe that's something that would align with the track 1 planning grant. But because of this definition and the purpose of the program just up above,
Mhm.
increasing purchasing of local, environmentally sustainable, climate smart, and equitably produced food by schools and other institutions. Because of this, direct to consumer activities and sales is generally not allowed for this program, with some very specific exceptions that I'm happy to talk about today and show in the RFA if people have questions about that too. But so even if your plan was to look at, well, how could we get more local food to sell to individuals or sell to families, that also would not be allowed, because the purpose here is to try to increase purchasing of food by institutional buyers, nonprofit buyers like public schools and food banks, nonprofits serving low-income communities and folks like that. Yeah. Does that make more sense?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, great question. Okay, I'm gonna go to chat and then Danny, you will be next. Can you confirm that the word limit when describing the project team is 800 words? Gosh, let me double check what we wrote in there. My computer's being slow. Sorry. Oh, here we go. Project team. Okay, let me share my screen. I'm looking at the track 2 one. I'm pretty sure I made them the same between track 1 and track 2. This is the track 2 application questions. So project team members and experience, part A, no word limit. But then the producer-led community food hub is 1,000. I wrote 1,000 and then 800 here. I realized, sorry. Well, you could do either 1,000 or 800, I guess, because I didn't catch that typo. Apologies. But for the roles where you're describing their responsibilities during the project, summary of their experience, things like that, there's no word limit for that particular section, part A. Right, Danny, your hand is raised too, so I'm gonna ask you to unmute.
Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for holding these office hours. I have two questions, if you don't mind. The first is, um, so we're applying for a track one planning grant, and so we plan to implement a pilot phase. Is that allowable under planning grant?
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like what kind of costs do you want to cover?
Yeah, so the pilot, it was currently right now, it would just be we're planning to just kind of like submit inventory sheets to produce buyers. And so it's just kind of coordinating we'll basically be serving as the middleman between farmers and potential produce buyers. And so by piloting that, we want to kind of gain feedback on how to like improve processes for when we actually develop a food hub.
Okay. Yeah, if I'm understanding it correctly, well, so track 1 planning should be focused on the planning activities, so funds shouldn't be used for the food hub operation. But so as long as that's true for your proposal, then that sounds fine. But if I'm understanding correctly, you want to, sounds like maybe build relationships between growers and buyers, and kind of
Yeah,
figure out the logistics of it. Is that right?
yeah. So phase one, we were essentially planning to develop that network, and then phase two would be to kind of like test the waters and see like what the processes look like. So that was kind of we were planning to split into two phases, where phase one would just be identifying produce buyers as well as identifying farmers. And then phase two would be trying to pilot all of that and see if um, it's viable.
Okay. Um, Yeah, potentially. I mean, it's a little difficult sometimes to respond without like seeing all the details, but I'll say that you couldn't use track one funds, for example, for hard infrastructure or to like buy a refrigerated van or anything like that. That typically is what enables the aggregation and distribution for the food. Um, but yeah, so it depends. It's always kind of like depends on the details a little bit. And for costs that you're proposing, and you'll need to justify why they are necessary and reasonable to implement the project goals. Um, and then yeah, so hopefully that helps a little bit. And you mentioned produce buyers, so I just want to make sure that it's understood that the buyers that are prioritized for this program are public institutions and nonprofits, especially public schools and food banks and other nonprofits serving low-income communities. So that's also something to keep in mind for the plan they're proposing.
Sounds good. And then my follow-up question would be, would I couldn't find it anywhere under allowable or unallowable costs, but is it possible for us to kind of have sort of like demonstrations where we show like the potential like buyers of the food banks and schools how to cook these produce?
Oh, interesting. Yeah, potentially. Again, it kind of depends on what your proposal is. So yeah, if it's part of your planning process to engage your buyers and showcase the produce that they might be interested in buying in the future from a hub, then yeah, that might be um some allowable costs for that. So
Thank you, I
yeah,
really
because that
appreciate it.
yeah, I was gonna say that could fall under like the community engagement section. I think we had some examples in there, like organizing events and things like that would be allowed. So yeah, if that's part of your engagement strategy, that could work.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Okay, I'm gonna focus on the chat a little bit more. So I know there's a lot of questions in here, and then Campbell, you're next. Janelle, can the letters of support be attached to the email as separate PDF files? I wanted to combine them into one file, but since they are e-signed, I can't figure out a way to combine them unless I scan them, and then they are harder to read. Gotcha. Yeah, you can submit them as separate files, absolutely. Or a zip file if that's easier, and sometimes our email servers won't let us send a bunch of attachments at once. Joe, we have our letters of support, but do we really need quote wet signatures or e-signatures, or are signed letters okay? Yeah, signed letters are fine, meaning like physically signed, Joe. Also, hi, nice to see you. Yeah, physically signed are fine. That's what I meant by wet signatures. Yeah, so that's totally fine. If you want to have them physically sign it and then scan that, that works too. And then Heather, can you talk a bit more about which type of business support entity would be a good fit for the letter of support for track 2? Yeah, good question. So I'm gonna open up the track 2 application questions. Okay, so this is the track 2 application questions document, and at the near the bottom on page 12 is the letters of support section where it has all the instructions and guidelines for this part. So for business economic development supporter, the description is here in some examples, but essentially it's an individual or organization that has the business or economic development expertise. So someone that is supporting your project that brings that kind of experience and perspective to your project and is willing to support you in some way. So some of the examples were a small business center, a county economic development agency, or some kind of organization with business coaching, financial services, or other business technical assistance expertise, something their organization offers. So these are just examples. It does not need to be these types of organizations, the business center or an economic development agency. Those are just some examples. Hopefully that helps. If you have specific ideas that you want to pass by, feel free to put that in too. And then Angelica, and then Campbell, you'll be next. So, question about Part B, addressing buyers' needs in the application question. That's for track 2. Describe specific buyers' needs. Do we need to describe a specific need that applies to many buyers or a specific buyer's need? I guess it's what you have to share. It kind of depends on what buyers you are planning on working with or hope to work with. I'm gonna pull up that section. Again, this is the track 2 application questions. So describe specific buyers' needs and how the Food Hub will address those during operations. For example, buyer A will expect XYZ types of food products, food safety verification, invoicing, or delivery logistics. The Food Hub will do CDE to address those needs. We have included Z and X in the project budget to address those needs. So yeah, it depends. I mean, if you have a lot of buyers that might fall in the same category and they have a lot of the same or overlapping needs. I could see someone describing that as a category versus every single specific one in that. But if you have buyers who have different needs, which can be the case a lot of the time, then you might consider breaking those out and making that more clear and detailed for reviewers, so that they can tell that, what those needs are for your buyers. Yeah. Okay. Campbell. Feel free to unmute.
Thank you. And thank you for having this. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but this has been great listening to other folks. So I've just like 2.5 questions, really. So I'm wondering, I can either apply for this grant through my nonprofit, which is a action research nonprofit, as a buyer, or because it's going to be for a school, for the school I teach at. I teach CTE Culinary Arts and Food Nutrition. So it can either be for, we'd like to do a food pantry. So I guess what I'm asking, as a buyer, would it be better to have this, like me apply for the school as the buyer, because I have for food, I have about a $14,000 to $20,000 budget already, and it's discretionary. I can buy it from wherever. Does that satisfy that requirement as a buyer? I'm not sure, because we're not going to resell it. It just goes, it goes to my program, or it goes to the pantry, that kind of thing. But we're buying it, and we'd like to be sustainable and local, and eventually I'd like to take on the the lunch program. But
Yeah. So it sounds like the model you're describing doesn't align with the definition of community food hub that I was showing earlier. So because the food hub is meant to be the intermediary between the food producers and buyers. So you kind of sound like that you would be the buyer. So the one on the other end that would be looking for a food hub, perhaps, or other distributor selling California food. And also what you mentioned, food pantry, and typically that's food that you're donating or giving away for free, which or you're subsidizing the cost maybe. So those types of things aren't allowed for this grant program anyway, as a CDFA regulation. Yeah, so the food hub, which this program is investing in, would be more like, sometimes people describe them as more local or community-based food distributors. Sometimes that helps a little bit more, so with the visualization, but they're the ones that are going to be interacting with the producers to aggregate their food, market their food, distribute, sell their food to buyers on the other end. And buyers, ideally for this program, would be public institutions and nonprofits, like public schools, food banks, and other nonprofits serving low-income communities. So yeah, it doesn't sound quite like what you're describing would align with the definition or the purpose.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I was asking which one I could use to be a buyer. So as a nonprofit, if I'm the buyer and I'm selling it to the school, is that not, would it be better just apply as a nonprofit as the buyer, as the food hub, and then sell it to the school? That's what I mean. Because I didn't, that's what you were
Oh,
thinking, you were saying about all the other stuff. I was like, oh, it doesn't sound like that. But as a nonprofit, I could be the food hub and then sell it to the school because it's a public
yes,
institution.
yes.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
Sorry, when I hear buyer, I'm thinking of the institutional buyer, but yes, yeah, exactly. So a nonprofit is eligible to apply to be a food hub and to create a new food hub as well. Yeah, so as long as you're sourcing from California food producers, providing those aggregation, distribution services, marketing services for them to then sell their products to those, public school buyers, for example, then that would align. Yep.
Okay, thank you for that. Because we're just doing a feasibility study. I'm not going to be applying for a lot of money, so it's like we will get it done somehow, but with all the stuff that's getting cut right now, it's kind of, scary out there to try to deal with food banks at the moment, and scary for them. And then just quickly on the, so you said that community events would be fine because we're looking for stakeholder involvement in the design of the items that folks can pick up at the pantry, like zero waste kind of thing. So that would be covered if we had a community, culturally inclusive event to talk to folks about, one, whether they, want this, and two, maybe get an idea of what we would be stocking for them so they could choose, say beans and rice or, that type of thing. So could I use that for data? Just the data,
Yeah.
that kind of survey kind of,
Absolutely.
okay.
Yeah, so for track one planning grants, yeah, you can use costs related to outreach and community engagement, whether that's with your producers, potential buyers, other community members that might be involved in the whole planning process. Yeah, if you need to purchase any survey software to help with collecting data, things like that would be allowed. Yeah, renting venues that you might need to use for community events, stuff like that. Absolutely.
And that was my next question. And anything specific that we could buy for just the feasibility study, like a iPad or a small laptop or something to store data solely on that, or is that not covered, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for stuff like that, I mean, with all costs you're proposing, you need to justify why it's necessary to implement the project. But yeah, if you needed to purchase an iPad or something, to do your outreach, just clearly explain why. As long as that iPad, for example, was only used for the project, then that would be considered a direct cost. If it was going to be shared for your nonprofit for other things your nonprofit's doing, you could include that potentially as an indirect cost. Yeah.
No, I'm looking at storing, personal data on it, and so I would like just I suppose it could be a external hard drive, but I would look to one device to add that, hard drive and keep it for however long we decide to keep the information for. So, okay, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you for being here. Okay, I'm gonna go to the chat and then the Maya. And I'll stay on for a few more minutes, but we are at 101. If I wasn't able to get to your question, please, please, please send it to the email address I just put in the chat. That's our email inbox, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, Heather, can you talk about how to account for facility payments? Can the grant only be used for quote rent? We own our building and rent payments go toward the mortgage. Yeah, so can you pay off your mortgage? You could not use the grant funds to pay off a mortgage because you entered into that before the grant term started. So that would be considered a cost incurred before the grant term. Carmen, are there any specific words, terms, or verbiage that we should avoid that might be flagged in an application, specifically when discussing socially disadvantaged farmers? And then this is a question that I'd also like to ask. No, nothing specifically with discussing socially disadvantaged farmers. No, no. Projects that are serving socially disadvantaged farmers, that's one of the priorities for the program. So no. And maybe you're thinking of something in particular. If you feel more comfortable emailing me direct to the email inbox, you can do that, Carmen. Just something I'll note for everyone. And it's on the materials is anything you submit to CDFA is considered therefore a public document. So everything is subject to a public records request with everything you send to public agencies. But no, there's nothing in particular that you should avoid. And then does CDFA allow a food hub to purchase from undocumented farmers and ranchers? Yeah, so we do not ask for details about immigration status from the producers you're working with. Maybe that was related to the other one, actually, now that I think about it. Great question. And then Joe. Oh, you're talking to someone else. Great. Maya, what about vouchers instead of donations? So giving vouchers to encourage shopping local. So, if you're giving vouchers, if you're using grant funds to give vouchers to people, that would be considered a donation because you're giving people money. I think is what you mean by a voucher. And then this grant program is not intended to cover costs related to direct to consumer activities or sales. With some very specific exceptions, and those exceptions are in the request for application. I will show you which section. This is the request for application. So page 13 in section 1.6, allowable and unallowable costs. At the very beginning, it talks about unallowed costs related to donating food and other donations and contributions, allowed costs related to serving private institutions, and then costs related to direct-to-consumer distribution. Goes into details of examples of what's not allowed and what would be allowed. So I would need to know a little bit more about what you were discussing, Maya, but if you were food hubs for this program are meant to be selling food to institutional buyers. That is the emphasis for the program. So, oh my, you're right here. Perfect. I get so focused on chat, I don't even see his hand is raised sometimes. Here you go. You should be able to.
No, that's perfect. You answered the first part of the question. So I'm just thinking that I guess a lot of us in reading that didn't really put it together. So I'm glad that I'm not alone. So I think it's similar to the last guy. So the nonprofit that I work for, maybe they could instead, like our farm could be funded by them potentially, like our positions of our farmers, and then we go to market and we sell the produce to the community. Is that possible? Or I mean, can you directly fund farmers and our positions to be farm, because we farm on the reservation. We've got 90% staff that are indigenous, or 80, I don't know, and we have a lot of great things we're doing, but I'm just trying to figure out how we can fit into this grant, because we have this opportunity where there's folks that are, I was going to do it through my nonprofit, but then my nonprofit I work for is like, no, we'll do it. And I'm like, perfect, because we're just getting going. But I'm not sure I'm understanding the parameters in what I read. So if they're going to help us, we were just going to fund the positions and work it as a farm, and then have it help us get to the farmers markets, because we're so rural. It's like local produce is so expensive. Would something like that work, or no?
Remind me again, are you looking at track 1 or track 2?
Track 1.
Okay. Yeah, so since it's a planning grant, it's focused on planning activities. So you wouldn't be able to use any funds for distributing food or like operating as a food hub per se. So
We could
no.
do 2 then we could do 2. Let's do 2. It's fine. Forget
So
that.
yeah, track
Yes, track 2.
track 2 is so track 2 is more implementation focused. So
Okay.
that's where you're purchasing hard infrastructure and equipment like refrigerated vans or coolers or necessary costs for aggregating, distributing, marketing food to institutional buyers. But that's the key part, the institutional buyers and the nonprofit buyers. So not to sell food at farmers markets, not to sell food through a CSA box program.
But we could sell it to schools and we need to get food into the schools. So if we got some refrigerated trucks to distribute food locally to schools from farmers locally, then yes, but not for
Yes,
CSA boxes.
right.
Okay, not for farmers markets. Okay, then I guess I'll have to look at track 2 because I've been looking at track 1. Well, now you know what we want a grant to be available for. So I'm rooting for all of us that California does that next. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Maya. All right, I will take again for anyone because we'll have to close this down soon. If you but wasn't able to get to your question in chat, please email it. I am on that email inbox. It's just me on the other end. Joe. Some of the beef producers in our area who have signed producer verification forms use their own name, not an entity name. Is that okay? Um, yeah, I guess because we need to match the verification form who signed it with who's on the network list. So if on your network list, Joe, you can note if you know, their company name and they just forgot to put it down. You could know like what their name is. That might help reviewers. But ideally people would be putting their business name in that section. But yeah, sometimes people overlook some things. Um, just looking at my calendar real quick. Okay, I can take one more question. Emily, let's see. Here you go. Go ahead and unmute.
Hello, thank you. A couple quick questions. We're a track 2 applicant, and one of our producers is actually a nonprofit who owns the cows. And so when I'm filling out the Excel, it asks for the owner of the producers if they're in a disadvantaged class. But since they're owned by a nonprofit, there's not an owner within the nonprofit. So how can I best fill that out, or should I note that it's a nonprofit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, in that situation, you could answer the socially disadvantaged question based on the nonprofit's leadership team or board.
Okay, got it.
You can choose leadership team or board. Yeah,
And then maybe I'll just write like in a parentheses 501(c)(3) or something.
sure. Yeah, you can do that.
One more quick question. Within the application, when it says put your text here, it's in blue. Do you want us to put our responses in blue? Do you have any preference in terms of size, font, color, any of that stuff?
No requirements. It was in blue really for your benefit so you could see it. I'm sure our reviewers would appreciate if it was in a different color or highlighted or something. But there's no requirements around the font color or the size or anything. Um, just I mentioned earlier, just make sure you don't delete what's in the document when you download it, like all the questions and the headers and stuff. Keep that because otherwise reviewers won't know what you're answering. Yeah.
Great. Thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate your time.
Of course. Thanks, Emily. Great questions. So many good questions, and I'm gonna have to hop off for another meeting, but please email me your questions. I do try to respond within 2 days at the most. Thank you all so much for being here, and yeah, best of luck, everyone.